The singing doesn't stop. Children's voices echo inside a church, while the doors are nailed shut from the outside. Then, an explosion. Flames rip through the building. Over 500 people burn alive. At first, the world calls it suicide, but days later, investigators uncover the truth. Secret graves, poisoned bodies, and leaders who vanished with suitcases of cash. This isn't just another cult. This is the story of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments, and how a hidden telephone to heaven, a feast of Coca-Cola and bulls, and suitcases carried past the flames, led to one of the deadliest cult tragedies in modern history. To understand how anyone could end up inside that burning church, you have to step back. Uganda in the late 20th century wasn't just unstable, it was unraveling. Decades of dictatorship had scarred the country with fear. Civil war tore apart communities. And then came the AIDS epidemic, leaving villages hollowed out, families broken, entire generations stolen. Trauma wasn't the exception. It was the air people breathed. The institutions that were supposed to hold people together were failing. Even the Catholic Church, once the foundation of moral authority, was cracking under corruption and scandal. Priests accused of abuse. Leaders accused of theft. The very rock people had leaned on was eroding. And when the old pillars collapse, people search for new ones. They want order, clarity, a voice that says, "I know what's coming. I can keep you safe." That's when movements like this thrive. Across Uganda, rumors of visions of the Virgin Mary spread like wildfire. Whispers of apocalypse echoed through villages. Farmers, mothers, even priests were primed to believe anyone who claimed to have divine answers. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments didn't look like a fringe sect. It looked like shelter, a Noah's Ark in the middle of a flood. It didn't just promise safety from the future, it explained the pain of the present. The group taught that the AIDS crisis wasn't random, but punishment for breaking the sixth commandment: "Thou shalt not commit adultery." When your world is collapsing, and someone offers not just an answer, but a path to survival, you don't hesitate, you don't question, you hold on. And in that holding on, the seeds of catastrophe were planted. The movement didn't begin with fire, it began with visions. Joseph Kibweteere was a man people trusted, a former teacher, a politician, the kind of figure you'd expect to run your school board or sit on the town council. He carried himself with dignity, with credibility, but behind the polished exterior, there was fracture. Just a year before the tragedy, he was reportedly treated for bipolar disorder. Whether that fueled his decisions or not, it added complexity to the man who would become the face of the movement. Then came Credonia Mwerinde. If Kibweteere was the face, she was the fire. A shopkeeper by trade, hardened by a difficult past. She didn't lean on reputation, she leaned on revelation. Mwerinde claimed she spoke directly with the Virgin Mary through what she called a hidden telephone system. Everyday objects, cups, tools, even stones became channels of heaven's voice. To outsiders, it sounded delusional. Inside the circle, it made her untouchable. She wasn't a preacher, she was God's messenger. Together, they became a paradox. Kibweteere, the respected authority, and Mwerinde, the prophetic terror, masculine legitimacy paired with mystical urgency. Their influence only deepened when defrocked priests and nuns joined them, weaving Mwerinde's visions into familiar scripture. What could have looked like rebellion now looked like restoration. It wasn't a break from the church. It was the church's return to purity. By the early 1990s, the group gained official recognition as a non-governmental organization, a stamp of legitimacy that shielded them from suspicion. By the late 90s, their following swelled to nearly 6,000. Farmers, mothers, priests, all of them drawn by one central promise: salvation from the end that was coming. But purity on paper was just the opening act. In practice, the restoration demanded far more than prayer. It demanded silence, obedience, sacrifice, and soon it would demand lives. So how do you convince thousands of people to surrender everything? Land, money, even their own identity, and follow you into the hills? You don't start with fire. You start with promises. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments didn't chase skeptics. It went after the faithful, farmers who already prayed to Mary, mothers desperate for protection, men crushed by years of war, disease, and poverty. And here's the hook. They weren't told to abandon Catholicism. They were told they were saving it. The church, they said, had strayed. The Virgin was speaking again. The Ten Commandments had to be restored before the world ended. To ordinary believers, this didn't sound like heresy. It sounded like homecoming, continuity, the voice of heaven, saying, "Come back to me. I'll keep you safe." But joining meant more than belief. It meant action. Followers sold their cattle, their land, their homes. They handed over the money. Then they moved into compounds, tight, crowded communities, where everyone had already given up everything. No possessions, no property, no past. Pooling assets wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic. Once you gave up everything, leaving became impossible. There was nothing left to walk back to. And once you stepped inside those compounds, the walls began to close in. Once you were inside, the rules closed in like invisible walls. Life wasn't just communal, it was silent. To avoid bearing false witness, entire days were spent without speaking. Communication shrank to hand gestures and whispers of prayer. At first, it felt holy. Then, it felt suffocating. You couldn't ask your neighbor if they doubted. You couldn't comfort your child when they cried. Even fear had no voice. And the stripping away didn't stop there. Your possessions, gone. Your land, signed over. Even your clothes were replaced with identical green and white robes. Everyone looked the same. Everyone acted the same. Your individuality dissolved. Even your body wasn't yours anymore. Soap was banned as a sinful indulgence. Sex was forbidden. Fasting became routine. Suffering wasn't an accident. It was mandatory. And when you joined, there was a ritual to mark the point of no return. Your hair and fingernails were cut, burned, and mixed into a drink. You swallowed it. The ashes smeared into oil and rubbed onto your skin. It wasn't baptism. It was erasure. A ceremony designed to kill the old you, so only the cult could define the new one. Day by day, the movement reshaped you. You weren't just following commandments. You were living in a world where every breath, every silence, every sacrifice was controlled. And above it all, loomed a date carved into everyone's mind. December 31st, 1999. The day the world would end. You've given up everything. Your home, your land, your family ties. You've obeyed the silence. You've swallowed the ashes. You've fasted until your body trembles. And now, the day is here. December 31st, 1999. The leaders promised this was the end. A cleansing fire, a judgment that would wipe away the sinful. But not you. You would be spared. You would inherit the new earth. So you wait. You confess your sins. You sell the last of your possessions. You watch the sky, expecting it to split open. And then, midnight passes. The sun rises. January 1st, 2000. The world keeps turning. The crack is immediate. Doubts rush in. Some demand their money back. Others cling tighter, insisting there must have been a miscalculation. And here's the disturbing twist. The leaders may have planned for this all along. The leaders had a way out. Some told followers the date had simply shifted to March 2000. Others whispered that the true deadline was the end of the generation, the close of the new millennium. Different excuses, same result. The clock stretched, their control preserved, but not everyone bought it. For many, the contradiction was too sharp. You had staked everything on a prophecy that fizzled. And when some followers began to question, when they asked for their possessions back, people started to vanish, quietly, permanently. For the leaders, this wasn't a crisis of faith anymore. It was a crisis of control. The prophecy resets, March 17th, 2000. In the days leading up to it, you expect silence, prayer, fasting. But when you arrive at the Kanungu compound, you see something else. Celebration. 3 bulls roasted over open fire. 70 crates of Coca-Cola stacked in towers. Music and laughter spilling into the night. The smell of roasted meat. The fizz of soda bottles popping. For a moment, it feels like relief. Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe this is the beginning you were promised. But the feast is camouflage. On the final morning, the followers are herded into the church. Children first. Their voices rise in hymns, echoing off the walls. Then the doors slam shut, nailed from the outside. Windows sealed tight. Moments later, an explosion. Fire devours the building. Screams swallowed by crackling flames. More than 500 lives erased in a single inferno. But the truth didn't stay buried. Days later, investigators uncovered evidence of mass graves, hidden bodies, silenced voices, lives erased long before the fire. And the most chilling detail? Eyewitnesses swore they saw the leaders slip away as the compound burned, suitcases in hand. While their followers roasted alive, they walked calmly into the distance. The apocalypse wasn't divine. It was deliberate. A cover-up, lit like a funeral pyre. At first, the world calls it suicide. Another Jonestown. Another story of blind faith ending in flames. But then investigators start digging. Literally, the fire was just the beginning. Across southern Uganda, mass graves surface. One compound, 153 bodies. Another, 155. Then, 81 in a pit. 44 of them children. Autopsies reveal poison in their stomachs, strangulation marks on their necks, stab wounds in their chests. These weren't martyrs choosing fire. They were victims silenced long before the church burned. And here's where the betrayal deepens. Local officials had defended the group for years. Neighbors complained about child labor, about disease spreading through filthy compounds, about strange rituals. But instead of being shut down, the group was shielded, protected. Even after being banned once before, they were allowed to reopen. By the time the investigation ends, the scale is undeniable. 924 dead. Not mass suicide, mass murder. When the final count emerged, 924 dead, the shock ripped through Uganda and beyond. For local families, the grief was unbearable. Parents who thought their children had chosen heaven discovered instead they had been deceived, stripped of dignity, and killed. Entire villages lost bloodlines in a single sweep. Survivors said the betrayal was worse than death itself. The promise of salvation had become smoke and silence. For Uganda's leaders, the massacre was an international humiliation. What began as whispers of visions and prophecy had grown into the world's second-deadliest cult killing, second only to Jonestown. And the investigation revealed what everyone feared. Officials had ignored warnings, defended the group, even protected it. Globally, the narrative shifted. This wasn't another Jonestown. It wasn't suicide. It was manipulation, murder, and money. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments wasn't remembered as a community of martyrs. It became a case study in how apocalyptic faith can be twisted into crime. But the most haunting part? The masterminds were gone. Eyewitnesses swore they saw Joseph Kibweteere and Credonia Mwerinde walk away that final day, suitcases in hand. And though rumors surfaced for years, sightings in Malawi, whispers of escape across borders, no one was ever arrested. No justice was ever served. And in that absence, the tragedy of Kanungu remains unfinished, an open wound in Uganda's history and a chilling reminder. Strip this story down to its bones. And it isn't just about prophecy or fire, it's about people. People searching for safety in a broken world. People so desperate for answers that they surrendered their voices, their possessions, even their dignity, trading soap for sin, speech for silence, identity for ashes in a cup. And that's the terrifying part. This isn't just Uganda in 2000. This is human. Because when life feels chaotic, we want to believe the voice that says, I can keep you safe. I know what's coming. And that promise can feel stronger than reason. That's how silence becomes obedience. That's how community becomes control. That's how a Coca-Cola feast can lead to a locked church door. And here's the hardest truth. It didn't happen in secret. Neighbors complained. Officials looked away. Leaders carried their suitcases past the flames, while the world called it suicide. This is the story of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. But it's also a mirror, showing us how fragile we are, and how easily faith, fear, and silence can be turned against us. So I'll leave you with this. If belief can save us, what happens when belief becomes the weapon? If stories like this matter to you, share it. If it opened your eyes, tell me in the comments what part hit hardest. And if you want more stories like this, stories of power, psychology, and the dangerous side of belief, subscribe, because the next story might be even closer to home.